no doubt that we're in a time of change, and that gives us opportunities to do things differently. But what is the change that we're seeking? The good life, better lives, my choice, my way, they're all terms we hear constantly. However, what do they really mean in reality? Now, yesterday, and you know, this was not, what do you call it? We didn't know this was going to happen, but yesterday Belinda used the word paradigm, and so did Linda. And here's what a paradigm is. So a paradigm is a set of assumptions, concepts, values and practices that constitutes a way of how we view reality. And there are many different ways which we can view the world. Our views then shape how we think, how we respond to things, what we choose, what we do, and what we say. Sometimes we can be deeply unaware that we even hold a worldview or a paradigm that is actually shaping our lives. We don't even know that we hold that view. As you can see in the definition, a paradigm affects our practices, things we do or don't do, the choices we make, the things we think are possible and worth pursuing. Many of us have come across many different paradigms in relation to disability. The social model of disability, the charity model of disability, the burden model of disability, the shame model of disability, the hero or inspirational model of disability. In my journey with my daughter and speaking to many, many other families over the last 24 years, we have collectively experienced many of these ways of thinking, as have people with disability themselves, and how it has shaped what our family members have been offered in their best interests. Our family and many others have a vastly different paradigm or way of looking at the world in relation to people with disability, and therefore live a different life as a result. I'm going to share with you our paradigm in relation to family, to learning, who people belong with, safety, and contribution to community. And I'd really like to thank all the men, women and children who so generously contributed to the presentation that I'm making with you this afternoon. Now, the first one I want to address is ideas about the impact on family that disability or the presence of disability has. Now, these are the things collectively many of us have heard. It's not fair on the other children. They will be a burden on your family. Special people have special children. I can tell you we're not that special. They're a punishment for sins of the past. Okay, I can hear murmurs. That one's been said to me on numerous occasions, quite frankly. There, but for the grace of God go I. Okay? So that comes from a particular paradigm or paradigms. But this is the alternative that our family and many others live by. Families appreciate the uniqueness of each individual and embrace everyone in love and commitment to each other. And here we have some examples. See, we've got the Samuels Connell children, Margaret as a godmother. Who could not forget the Payne family's celebration at the winning of the Melbourne Cup? Right, these are all the brothers and sisters. This is Dad and his family, and Dan's a man with significant behavioural and intellectual challenges, but embraced into the body of the family. We've got Jai camping with his family, Sharry's son, I know you're there somewhere. We've got the Sweeney children, and I do apologise for that horrendous wig that Jocelyn is wearing. In hindsight, it wasn't such a good idea. She has alopecia, and this was one of the occasions she had no hair. But looking back, you think, oh, what was I thinking? She doesn't wear a wig these days because she clearly articulates that, you know, they're itchy. And here we have Naomi, who was a bridesmaid for her sister. Okay, then we have another group which is around learning. Who hasn't heard these ones? They plateau. They have a mental age of 2. Concentrate on living skills. They're a vegetable. He's stopped learning, or she has stopped learning. They can't learn. If they haven't learned it by now, they never will. Now that grand statement was made when our daughter was 12 around reading, and those of you in the last session, she's actually learned how to read as an adult when she left school. Because our paradigm is all people are lifelong learners. And here we have Dan learning computing. Dale is a KFC employee and learned all he needed to have that role. Jade is an office assistant. Tim and Grace. Grace has Down syndrome, learning how to ski. Emma studied at Sydney University, as did Nathan, we heard yesterday. Here's Marla, lovely Marla that you've met, making a canoe. Zuzu is a Japanese man who is an orchestra conductor. And here we have Rachel, who is learning to use a power chair. And that was a huge fight for her mother to get her the opportunity to learn to use a power chair, because everyone said she didn't have the capacity to do so. But she is now a learner power chair driver with L plates to prove it. Now we have ideas about where people belong and who they should spend time with. Better off with their own kind. Water finds its own level. Won't they be lonely with others, without others the same? No one will be their friend. Our children are too disabled. My child is too disabled. Our clients are too disabled. However, a different paradigm is a rich network of experience that includes many people from all walks of life. So here we have Alex at a community event. He's from Bathurst. Jai at the swimming carnival. Bo from Melbourne is a footy coach and an AFL employee. David is a Woolworths employee. Cameron, and he's here with his house. Cameron's the AFL fan, and he's here with his flatmate, housemate Lincoln. Rhiannon, centre front there in the combined school choir. What a powerful photo that is, belting out in the school choir with all of the other regional schools. And here's Dale and his housemate Brodie. Then we get ideas about safety. Simply, they won't be safe. Their brothers and sisters will be bullied. Many people hear that about inclusive education. Other children are so cruel, particularly when we're entering the high school region. However, I always found the teachers to be far more cruel than the children. They will get teased. The community is full of deviants. They'll be taken advantage of. But another paradigm is it's our collective responsibility that all people are valued and safe in our community. So here's Dan, and he lives in his own home. Cameron's here with his neighbour Sally. Alex is out and about with fellow folk music lovers. Jacob, we saw this yesterday, Jacob, Linda's son, on a road trip to Sydney with mates with no mother in sight. Dale has travelled the world. Then we've got ideas about community. The community aren't ready. No one would ever be their friend. They just won't fit in. They will embarrass people. They'll make people feel uncomfortable. They're too noisy. Other students will suffer. People just don't understand. However, all people have a place in our community and have presence and gifts to share with others. And as we saw, Nathan, finalist of the Australian of the Year, New South Wales. We've got Dan from Victoria as a band member. Another Dan is an employee at the Carlton Football Club. Jade is the owner of Bendigo Biggies, her own business. Cameron was actually invited to be, when we talk about role cascading, when he had his own house and he met his neighbour Sally, she invited him to be a volunteer at the local farmers markets. So he has another role in his life. And we've got Grace here, who is the captain of 4E at her local primary school. Now, I was fortunate enough last year to do some work for My Leadership Matters in facilitating a leadership course for people with disabilities and their families in Wollongong it was. And I met a most resilient woman I think I've ever met in my life. And her name is Deborah McKenzie. And she has given me permission to tell her story. And she, as part of the leadership program, she actually, with support, documented her life to teach people about resilience and leadership and change. So Deborah grew up in Nowra on the south coast of New South Wales, and upon leaving school, she was put into institutional care because that was the thought to be in her best interests. Deb lived for over 10 years in Kenmore, which is a huge institution on the Goulburn. We've got Stockton, which we're only seeing the closure of now, and the worst, she said, of all, Morisset. Deb rang her father each week and moved out of and between those institutions and finally out of the institutions because each place was so terrible. And however, that process took over a decade for her to actually get out of those large residential institutions. And after convincing her father that she should come home, she then lived in 2 different group homes in Nowra for another decade or so. Now, Deb always wanted her own home, and finally in her 40s, she moved into her own unit. So here she is, in her own unit. So for the first time in her 40s, she learned to clean, to cook, to manage her home. Now, she had support to do these things, but she learned how to do them. She had a pet for the very first time in her life, a budgie named Peter, who she proudly said used to call her name. She met her neighbour Nancy, and Nancy taught her to crochet. Deb now actually visits Nancy in the nursing home that she moved to and used that talent that Nancy taught her to crochet her a rug to keep her warm in the nursing home. Deb got the opportunity to attend TAFE and became a reader and a writer in her middle years. She learned to use technology and to do courses of interest, such as a fashion course. She attends gym and attends her club, which is the Bombarderi Bowling Club, for the raffles. She is also a Weight Watcher. Attending the leadership program gave Deb the confidence to document her life, and she has now presented it several times in a public speaking role, and her story is on ABC Open as well. And these opportunities are just developing for her. It's in its infancy. The program only was last year. So a lot more will come her way. Now, if nothing else, Deb's story reminds us that it's never too late to move to a new way of thinking. Many of the people I've mentioned were told the things that they're doing now are impossible because they didn't have the competence, it was unsafe, the community wouldn't be accepting, but they've had people around them with a different view, an enabling view. Once opportunities were presented and taken up, people have blossomed. So the people you see in those photos, I'm sure you all think, they look so confident. But it was not always the case. They've actually developed competence and a presence and an individuality because they've been given the opportunity to do that. And particularly Cameron, in talking to his mother, Cameron was the AFL footy thing, she said people don't believe how profound his impairment was when he first left home. Because that's a man with a dual diagnosis of mental health as well as intellectual impairment. And he was so unwell, but the only thing that was going to make him well was living in a home of his own. We hear many services now talk about individualised outcomes, personalised planning, choice and control. But if we also hear in the same sort of sentences or meetings or encounters, they, them, those, or our, in relation to people with disability, then rest assured they're not thinking about an individual. And the suggestions they make will probably reflect this. At a conference, I was talking to the CEO of a very large organisation. When he learned that my daughter Jocelyn had Down syndrome, he stated, "I love the Downsies." When I challenged his assumption that they were all the same, even though he said it with genuine heartfelt enthusiasm, he stuck surely to his guns about loving the Downsies. It left me wondering how any organisation could deliver individual outcomes when their thinking is so blinkered that they can only see the label or the disability and not the individual or the person. When we very first started, Diane, in the Acknowledgement of Country, said we're sharing stories to make us better people and a better community. So I encourage you in your quest for great lives where people thrive, learn, are known, are challenged, are loved, who work, and that their individuality is nurtured and appreciated. I firmly believe that that is what is in people's best interests. And just in finishing, we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world.